day everyone. So in this video we're going to do this spoon. So basically it is the spoon we use every day. So let's start. The first thing we need to do is to have this 143.5 as the total length of the spoon. So let's start. So top plane, sketch, then create a center line for the guidelines. So have a 143.5 units. Then after that, so we need to have this curve of the spoon. So it has a radius of 6. So have a arc, then from this point up to this point. So make sure that this point or the center of the arc is coincident with this line. So select coincident or add relation. So after that, we need to have the radius of this arc. So the radius is 6 units. Then after that, so we need to have this semi-arc or arc of the spoon or the handle of the spoon. So the radius of that handle is 600 units. So select line, then point out from this point, then drag it and back to this point so you can have a arc. Then click. So then after that, we need to have a center line. Point out right here, then to this point, and select the midpoint of this center line and this center line, which is the horizontal center line or the base, then make it coincident. So we will have the dimension from this point and up to this center line, which is 50 units. Enter or OK. Then after that, we need to connect this length up to this point. So just extend it so we can have a bigger center line. Then extend this line up to this point. Then the next thing we need to do is to have this arc with the radius of 6 units also. So use arc and drag it like that. Then make sure, just like what we did before in this part, that this center is coincident with this center line. Then check. The next thing we need to do is to have the dimension of this center line up to this, or this point up to this center line. So what we have is 18 units. So type 18 units. Then we will put the dimension of 6 as its radius. So the next thing we need to do is to have this arc of the spoon, or the overall arc of the spoon. So we need to have 1, 2, 3 arcs. So let's create it by 3-point arc. First one by this, then second one. So just modify it. So then create the dimension. This is 20 units. Just modify it to have a, then just like in the picture, so the center of this radius 20 is the end point of this 7 units. So we will have the dimension from this point up to this center line. So from this point up to this point, and type 7. Then just hold this and create dimension by 40. So just modify it in order for us to have a smooth curve. And the last one is to have the small arc from this point up to this point, then create 10 units. So just drag it. So just like what we did before, this center point must be coincident with this center line as its relation. So just modify it to have a smooth curve. So as we can see, we're already done with the upper part or upper bound of the spoon. And now we will use mirror entities to mirror it to this part or in downward direction. So select the entities to mirror is to select those lines we want to mirror, and mirror about with this center line to have it in the bottom part. So as we can see, the dimension was removed. So just create another dimension, then create another dimension from this point to this point is 143.50. Then the next thing we need to do is to stretch out this center line to the left. Then make sure that this origin point and this end point is coincident. Then this point and this origin point must be coincident also. Then temporarily we will hide those measurements and we will use it later. So after that, so choose front plane and sketch, then Control 8, and after that we need to have these measurements or the general curve of the spoon, just like this 119, 40, 74, 76, and 111. So let's make it by, so from this point, drag it below or just pan it downward, then click right here and create a arc. After that, we need to ensure that this point or this end point must be vertical with this end point. Then add dimension from this point up to this point by 20 units. Then after that, we need to have the dimension of this arc by 500. So just like in the given figure. So this is the radius, which is the 500. Just drag it here. And for now, we'll create a guideline in order for us to complete the measurements. So create smart dimension or dimension from this point up to this point by 35, and from this point up to this point by 76 units. And this section must be, or this line, center line, must be 40 units. Then from this point up to this point, it must be 111 units, just like in the figure. And from this point up to this point by 119 units, just like in the given figure. So in order for us to continue the line, so this point must be vertical with this end point. And the next thing we need to do is this radius and this arc. So randomly we can point out from this point downward, then from this point up to this point, and from this point up to this point. Then make sure that this point must be vertical with this point. Then make sure that this center point must be horizontal with this point, and it must have a smart dimension from this point up to this point, from this point up to this point by 74. So just fix this to have a smooth curve. Then this arc, it must have a dimension or radius of 40. Then this point must be vertical with this point. So as we can see, we already completed the general curve of the spoon. So the next thing we have to do is to have this 3 sections. So we will have 3 different sections, which is AA, BB, and CC, in order to do the different face of the spoon. So in order to do that, choose right plane, then hold Control key and drag it up to this point. So the first section is about 6 units. Again, click right plane and drag it up to this point. And the next measurement is 76 units. So before we forget, let's change this name to section CC or just CC. And this plane is also B, or it must be BB. And for the last plane, drag it again to this point, and it must be 111 units. Okay, and again, change the name or rename it by AA. So as we can see, we already rename it by its desired plane. So the next thing we need to do is to sketch in plane CC and Control 8 and create an arc which is about 40 units, just like in the figure, which is this radius. So 40 units. But before we put the dimension, make sure that this endpoint and this endpoint is horizontal. So it must be 40 units. So let's just make it small. So after we resize it, so I'm gonna find the midpoint and this line and make it pierce. Check. So as we can see, it is attached to the general curve of the spoon. After that, we will proceed to section BB and sketch. So sketch and Control 8. Again, we will create a 3-point arc just like what we did in section CC. And for now, the radius must be 10 units. And before we forget again, this point and this point must be horizontal also. So after that, we will select this midpoint and this line and make it pierce. Check. So as we can see, we already have 2 arcs of the face of the spoon. So, and for the last one, so sketch again. So just exit sketch, Control 8, again create a 3-point arc for this section and make it horizontal just like what we did before. And the dimension of this arc is 30 units. And again, we will click the midpoint and pierce it with this line and check it. So the next thing we need to do is to have surface. So if this surface toolbar is not in your panel, so right click, then select tabs and check this surface, so it will appear in this panel. Then in order to have the overall face or the overall 3D modeling, so we will use boundary surface. So this part, and this part, and the direction must be this horizontal curve. So you can see the spoon. So as we can see, we already made this spoon, but to have a perfect spoon, so we will use trim surface, and so trim tool. So this is the subject, then click this part and also this part and check it. So the next thing we need to do is to have the thickness of the spoon. So select this thicken, then make sure it is 1 mm only, and select this surface. So after that, we need to fillet those edges in order to have a smooth edge. So the size of the radius is only 0.2 units. Then select this edge and also this edge and check it. So as you can see, we already completed the spoon. So that's all for now. Thank you and God bless.